In this video, we're going to discuss ways to approach the styling of the Eatery restaurant single-page website exercise that I've got in some of my classes. So in the earlier video, which you may or may not have gone through, I got the visually hidden class and added it to my style sheet. If you don't have that already, please add it and just search the internet for it. I'm going to pull up the way the site is supposed to look and the way it currently is with the markup we did in the first part of the exercise. So obviously the first style that I need to add is one I really need to add for any responsive website. I need to make my images responsive, so I'm going to make a style for image. Max width 100%, height auto. Reload my page. Now my images are fitting into their containers. They are never allowed to be larger than their container, which means they will always scale down as the page scales down. So I'm going to take you through some of the main parts of the styling. I'm going to go to the body. Because the document has content that goes all the way to the edge of the browser window, I'm going to give the body a margin of 0 and a padding value of 0. Now when I reload, we should see the images go all the way to the edge, and other content will as well. So I've added actually in between doing the video, I added a link to two fonts at Google, Spectral and Spectral Small Caps. Spectral Small Caps is 700 and 800 width. Spectral is the 400, 400 italic, and 700 font weights. Not widths, weights. Okay, back to my style sheet. So most of the document, the font family is Spectral, so I'm going to use that here. And if it's not Spectral, I'll just fall back to Georgia times New Roman, the usual. Okay. I'm going to also make anything that is a class of section title is going to use Spectral, but the small caps variety. So Spectral SC, and those I'll use exactly the same thing as the backup. Strange what Visual Studio just did there, but I'm not going to fight it. I'm just going to reformat. Go look at my page. There we go. The font that we want, etc. Next, I'm going to take care of the menu basics here. So I'll make a section for navigation. Here I'm going to say any UL that's in a nav will not have the dots. So list style type, none. I'm going to remove padding left by setting it to 0, and margin left as well. Some browsers, legacy browsers, will use margin to reserve the space for the dots, but now I've removed both of them. We're in good shape there. I'm going to make an area for the site header, perhaps. And that I'm just going to text align everything center. TAC is the Emmet shortcut. Great, everything's there. And we're just working on the mobile first. We're taking a mobile first approach. So this means let's get everything working for the phone before we devise the other sizes. I notice that my content here, the logo is touching the edge of the screen. So I'm going to set the site header to have a padding of, let's say, 0.5 rem on the top, and I'm going to use 1% left and right. There we go. Content is no longer touching. I'm going to set the color of the navigation, the links. I'm going to set the color of those to just a grayish color. So I'm going to say 777. I'll take a look at it in a second. I'm also going to remove the underline. So text decoration none. TDN shortcut. Bang. There we are. Let's give it a hover state as well. Nav a : hover. And let's just darken it a bit. Actually, I'm going to have a hover color on it. So color, I'm going to make white. Background color, I'm going to make hot pink. So when we mouse over there, we get this happening nicely. But I'm going to want a little bit more space between the edge of the box and the content there. So on my A, not on the A hover, because if you do it on the hover, it will get bigger when you hover it, but we want it to be actually on the A. So I'm going to say padding, I'm going to say 0.5 rem. I'm just going to look at it right now. That should work out to 8 pixels by default. Okay, so we see a little bit of strange behavior here. Specifically, the A here is, or the hover is going into the next element. So what I want to do is make these A's display block. When an item is block, you can actually pad the top and bottom of it, and all the other content will move. When an item is inline, like the default state of an A, padding on top will not move the other content because the content is actually in the line height. So let's see what happens there. We've spread the content out a bit. That's fine for now. But what we're seeing here is probably something we don't like. By these elements being blocked means they're taking the whole width of the content. I'm instead going to set the nav LIs to display. Actually, for now it's fine. We'll tweak it later. Let me check again. Yeah, that's a bit much. So on my menu social, I'm going to want the links to go side by side. So the easiest way to do that would be to set menu social's LI elements to be taken from their default block status to inline block. That means they will have certain block properties, but they will flow like text. Let me make sure I've got the correct HTML for that to work. Menu social LI. Oh, I didn't give it a class. So here I'm going to say class equals menu hyphen social. The class above it, I'm going to give a class, or the nav above it will get a class of menu hyphen main. And down at the bottom, I'm going to give, let me just check. I'm applying it to the nav, yep. I'll give this a class of menu social as well. And if I need to style it differently from the other menu social, I can always say site footer space menu social. Okay, so now, there we go. We see that because they're now inline elements, the LIs that are holding these A's, we get our menu showing up that way. Also in the screenshots, there was one additional link. I'll go put that in to my HTML. My apologies, I appear to have forgotten it. Or, let's see. Contact. Oh no, there were actually only 3. Okay, so I'm going to continue. But if we look here, oh, the last thing I got to also do is I got to accessibly hide the phrase the eatery. So what we have here is, because we've got a graphic logo, a graphic of a piece of text is by definition inaccessible, because that a screen reading software can't read the text in the image. A search engine can't either. So what I'm going to do here is make this accessible. I'm going to wrap this in an H1, but I'm going to give it a class of site title, but also our visually hidden class. So the visually hidden class allows us to accessibly hide content without it being hidden from search engines or screen readers. Now if I go look at the page, there we go. I'll just keep the default menu styling for now. Next, we're going to want to, I'll show you what we've got in the actual one. We see we've got this background image here, or each of these sections has a background image. So here's probably the easiest way for us to do that. I'm just going to fold my header for now, and I'm going to fold the head. It makes my document simpler. We've got here these 3 different meal sections inside a div with a class of meal sections. So what I'm going to do is go by this meal class and make a style of all of the common background image properties that will apply here. So back to my styles. I'll go below the navigation, because I tend to go through the document in order. And let's say here, menu sections, or I'll call it meal menu sections, so we're not confused by navigation menus as opposed to food menus. There we go. So I'm going to do dot menu. I'm going to say here color, or I'll do the color in a second. And first I'll do the background image. So background image. To do a background image that's a file that you have on your site or on the internet, we use background image. The value is the URL function. So I go here, URL bracket bracket, making sure there's no space between URL and the first bracket. I'm going to put a semicolon at the end. Inside, I'm going to put a quotation mark, single or doubles, and then the path to the file. So I'm going images / I'm going to start with breakfast.jpg. I'm going to go check the page. That's the completed one. Here's the one that's not complete. Okay. Images, breakfast.jpg, reload, not working. First thing I would do, inspect. If you click on console, it'll give you a message if you've got the path wrong, and it'll tell you it can't find the resource. So right now, if I go to section, the meal section, for some reason this is not working. So I'm going to make sure I've saved my HTML and my CSS. Reload. Back to my CSS. Oh, I put menu instead of meal. I'm doing the thing I was warning against. There we go. So we're seeing each of these menus has a background image. Great. Next, I'm going to do background size, because what we're seeing right now is a very, very small part of the overall image. So if I look at the breakfast image here, we see, looks like croque monsieur and some ahi tuna, etc., and some sort of sandwich. We're only seeing a tiny part of that. What we need to do here is use background size, and we can use a pixel value or a percentage value, but a really handy keyword on background size is cover. If I give background size a value of cover, what we now see is the browser will try to, if it can, the image will scale the background image proportionally. If it can't scale it proportionally, it will just cut off the edge of it. Very, very handy property here. So that's great. We've got ourselves a background image for these different menu sections. Next, I'm going to want to add what's different to the specific sections. So getting at that, if I look in my HTML, I've applied that image to all of them. Now I'm going to specifically apply different images to meal lunch and meal dinner. So meal-lunch, oops. I accidentally triggered Siri there. Thank you, laptop. Meal, lunch, and meal, dinner. I'm going to copy that code that works, paste it into both of these guys. All I need to do is have the corresponding lunch image and dinner image for the respective meal times. So here we go. Great, we're having our ahi tuna for dinner. Hooray. Next, on meal, which I will repeat, I've styled each of these food menus with a class of meal, but also each one with a unique class. So I use the generic common class meal for some of the common properties, and anything that's unique I apply specifically with meal lunch and meal dinner to the specific classes. So back here, next I'm going to say this is a very useful property. Background hyphen attachment. Background attachment determines whether the background image will scroll with the content or do something else. And what we can do here is if we give it a value of fixed here means not moving. It doesn't mean it was broken, but we have corrected that. Fixed literally means not moving. So if I go test again, when I scroll the page, the section moves up the page, but the background image doesn't move up the page. And people go gaga for this parallelism, or whatever, it's a parallax effect. But it's in this instance is very easy to do. Next, I'm going to make the meal have white type. So font, family, I'll just do color, because it's taking the font from the body declaration. Color white. Okay, now we're going to need some background, some translucent backgrounds. And if we go look at our markup, we might get some interesting, we're going to have to examine our markup a little bit. In the HTML, these sections are identical. We have tables, so 3 tables in each section, plus 1 H2 with a class of section header. So the section header will be easy to do. Whoops. Section header, and you know, I might want to put this in a separate typography section, but you get the idea. I'm going to say background color, hot pink, color white, font family. Oh, I think I actually have a style for it. Section title. Let me just check. Okay, section title was that. Let me look at what is actually done. Headings use spectral. Okay, so that heading is the small caps. That's the caption. So yeah, I was doing it up there. I can actually, I'm just going to take that, move it up to the top. Look at my markup again. Section header. Put it in the wrong place. There we are. Here, section header, I believe, rather than section title. There we go. And of course, text align center. And a tiny bit of padding. I'll just use the same padding. 0.5 rem, 1%. Maybe I'll make it even a little smaller. Let's cut that top and bottom padding in half. We're good. Okay. So now the issue of the translucence. How are we going to get the translucent backgrounds? Let's look at the rest of our markup. In each of these sections, we have 3 tables. So could we give the tables the translucence? Let's try that. So section header, or I could do meal sections table. Good. Probably don't want this happening to all the tables on my website, so I'm using a descendant selector to limit it to only tables that are in the document. I'm going to give them a background color, and I'm going to use RGBA to get a translucent color. I'm going to do black with a certain, let's say, 0.8 level of transparency. A is the alpha, so it's the level of opacity. Okay, so we're here. Let's drop it down to 0.7. We always want to err on the side of legibility, so okay. We've got that happening. Next, we should set these tables to be 100% wide. So width. Tables are unusual creatures in that they're basically, even though they behave sort of block-like, they also behave in a way that's a bit unusual, that they don't take the full width of their container. So I'm going to reload that. Now they do take the width of their container. Let's see if we can pad it. I'm going to say 0.5 rem, 1% left and right. Okay, so we get some padding here. Will it work the way we want? We'll have to see. Let me go look back here at the finalized one. I think it will. Maybe. Let's get a bit of work done to the caption. So meal sections, caption. We will say font size 2 rem, FZ 2R. Maybe a bit big. 1.5 rem. I'm going to say margin 0 for now. Let's see what it does. Entrees, okay. Sides, there's a bit of extra space here. Oh, that's created by the margin top, the padding top of the table. So I'm going to just say here 0 on the top because there's already padding on the caption, 1% on the left, half a rem on the bottom, 1% on the right. Actually, that was a bit backwards. For now, it's not so bad. Let's figure out what's creating the extra space here. Oh, the table itself. Something is creating, oh, actually, the section heading probably has a margin bottom. Let's see. Yep, so the section heading, I can just test it right here in the browser. Margin, I'm going to give it a margin of 0 for now. Yep, good. Okay. Now, we notice right now some ugly alignments. We notice that the price is not ending up in the same place. So here's how I would target that. Each of these rows has 2 cells in them. So I'm going to do TD, nth of type, 1. And I'm going to duplicate that and make TD nth of type 2. And I'm going to give them both a width value expressed in percentage. Specifically, the first one I'm going to make 90 or 92% wide. The second one I'm going to have take the remainder of the space. So what we're seeing is the first TD is going to be 92% wide. The second TD gets the remainder. And I really wouldn't even need to specify this second width, because if I give the first one 92%, the second one gets the leftover space. So you could argue that that's redundant. I'll just comment it out. Won't make a difference in our layout. Okay, good. Now, one thing we could do, however, and maybe I'll keep this style, and in the I was thinking I would do something, but I'm going to do it on something else. So next, if we look at what the finished version does, is we see this interesting spacing, this line between them. And you know what that is? That's a border. So let's go put a border on our TD, our TR, and we might have a problem with it. Let's try it first. So TR, I'm going to say border hyphen bottom. I'm going to make it a big one, 10 pixels, solid, but again I'm going to use a translucent color, so RGBA. And this one I'm going to make white with a low opacity. Oops. Okay, right now we're not seeing it, so this is what I was referring to as we might have a few issues here. But if we go to our table style and say table collapse, border collapse, sorry. This is a really obscure property. I'll explain what it does in a sec. Border collapse with a value of collapse. What this does is, first of all, it makes it possible for us to use these the border on the TR, which probably sounds very mystical, but in order to demonstrate what's going on here, I'm going to comment that out for a second, and I'm going to give my TDs the same border. Okay. What border collapse does will become apparent if I comment out that value. When we have borders on TDs, there's actually a tiny little bit of space between them, which looks really stupid. So you would think, can I put it on the border? Or sorry, can I put it on the TR? The trouble is, the TR doesn't readily take that border. I'm going to comment out the TD here. When I do not have border collapse, the border on a TR doesn't show up. If I have the border on the TDs, we see that space here between them. If I use border collapse, that's going to remove that space. Okay, but we also see something else. And this is the kind of finicky aspects of CSS. If I comment out border collapse, when I look at my page, my padding still applies. We see the padding on the edge of the document, on the edge of the table, but we see the space between the respective borders of the TDs. Border collapse will remove that space, but have one other unfortunate effect. It makes these borders join, but they go all the way to the edge of the table. So what can we do? We need our padding back. So essentially, the padding on our table has disappeared. Here's the solution. I'm just going to go to my markup. I'm going to find my tables. There may be a brilliant solution. What I'm doing here is something, if there is a brilliant solution for this issue, I don't know it, but I have a simple solution that will work. I'm going to select my tables. Oops. So select the first table, select the second table. 1, 2, 3. So making sure I'm selecting the whole table, 3 of them in each section. I'm just going to wrap them in a div. So I'll give it a class of table wrapper. Oh, I appear to have one extra one. Let me do this again. It's back in my markup. Close the I'm folding the stuff here just to make the selections easier. One, 2, 3 tables selected. 4, 5, 6 tables selected. 7, 8, 9 tables selected. Wrap in divs with a class of table wrapper. Okay. Go back to my CSS. I'm going to take the translucence and the padding and apply it not to the table, but to the table wrapper. So if we do this, our tables are what are containing the padding. So the padding that we need so that the translucence goes all the way to the edge, but the tables don't. This is done with the outer div. Hooray, hooray. Okay. We got to get our captions going over to the left-hand side. Easy enough. Let's check the finished one. Yep, captions are on the left. The table captions. So text align left. There are entree sides. So it I think we had a style for caption somewhere. No, okay. So caption, I'm going to make font size 1.5 rem. Yeah, it's working, I think, for the most part. Okay, so menu here is working. Now we should put some space in between our rows because it's not pretty. What we should probably do is just pad the top of our TDs. Don't know. Yep, TD. padding top, 0.5 rem. Yeah. Okay. So our layout is working here. Let's get everything working at the bottom, and then we'll have to figure out on the responsive states. So we have a section here for staff members. And the class we used for the whole area was staff members. We had a class for staff member, so each individual person. So our staff members, if we look at the completed version, let's see what we've got. We have a dark to sort of purple to dark gradient behind it. All the text is white, and we've got some padding inside this section as well. So here, to get that gradient happening, we again use the background image property. This might seem a little counterintuitive because we're not actually loading an image. We're instead essentially asking the browser to create one using the linear gradient function. And how these gradient functions work is, in essence, we specify a color, then another color, and the browser will generate the states between them. So let's go to the, oh, I closed it. I will open it again. Scroll down here. Okay, we're not seeing it yet. Let's look at our HTML to make sure we have the correct classes. And I'm going to close this meal section so I'm not scrolling all over the place. Oh, we have div class. We did not put the staff members into their own section or class, so section or div. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to wrap it, and I'm going to put in a div with a class of staff members, plural. And this, if you started with the markup exercise, this may have already been done for you. There we go. We're seeing, we will see in a second, how the gradient works. The staff members div, I'm going to give a bit of padding. I'm going to say one rem on the top, and again, what have I been using for my other margins? Was it 1%? Yeah, I'm going to use 1%. This is going to make sure that everything lines up. Okay. So here starts off black. Let me increase that margin just so we can see how the gradient is working. The gradient here starts black, goes to purple, goes back to black. This purple's a little bit too light, so I'm going to put in here a color. I'm going to put in a custom color, and I'm going to use my beloved HSL color mode. The beauty of HSL is it's the only color mode where the hue is actually specified with only one value. If we use 3 numbers in RGB, we have to know how those 3 colors combine. With HSL, we just need to know where on the color wheel our red, green, or blue colors are. So as a wheel has 360 degrees, red is 0, it's first letter. G, the second letter, is 1/3 of the way around the circle, so 120. Blue, the last letter in RGB, is 2/3 of the way around at 240. If I want purple, purple is kind of halfway in between blue and red. So blue is 240, red is 0 or 360. I'm just going to put 300 and let me think. 300. 300 is halfway between 240 and 360. Then I'm going to use a saturation value of 50%, which is pretty much the default. This is the strength of the color. And I'm going to use a very low lightness value of about 30%, which means it's going to be a darker version of purple. We see that it's coming there. Maybe I will make it 20%. Let's see how it works. I think that works a little better. The beauty of HSL is that you can make up colors very intuitively. One last thing about the use of gradients, we can actually control the order, whether it goes top to bottom or left to right, and we will do that in a media query in a second. We can also say how far an element goes. So if I put here 40%, I'm going to make the black take 40% of the gradient before it starts going to purple. And if I put black here, the last one, at 60%, what this means is that the first stop in my gradient is taking the first 60%, then between, in this one, the black here is taking anything from 60 to 100. So the purple is occurring only between 40 and 60. Think of these as stopper, like color stops in Adobe Illustrator's gradient tool, or a lot of gradient tools. I think that's pretty neat. I'm going to go back and now reduce the amount of padding to maybe 1 or 2%. We're just doing that so we could see what the gradient was doing. Yeah, maybe 2%. Yeah, there's a little bit, just a little bit of visual interest here. Okay, so that's that working. Staff members, obviously the color needs to be white because we're against a black background, blackish background. We need text align center. If I look at the screenshot that came in the exercise. So these guys actually have more padding than I was giving there, but you get the idea. So we get the name of the person is sitting on top of the picture, and then below it their description is in this square box here. So let's go look at our markup to figure out we're going to create that effect. Specifically, staff member name needs to sit on top of the image. Staff member description is right underneath it. To do this reliably, I think the easiest way would be to wrap the image and the name of the person in their own div. If we then make that div be positioned relatively, we can position the staff member name in relation to that div. This is going to be better than trying to position the staff member name in relation to the staff member div, because the presence of the staff member description increases the height and makes the height less predictable. So I'm going to wrap these image plus staff member name combinations in divs. I'm going to give it a class of staff member img name wrapper, and I'm going to copy that right now so I don't forget it when I go to my style sheet. Now we see this is going to be very easy to style. Back here, paste that in. This element that is holding the image and the staff member name is going to be position relative but staff member name is going to be position absolute. If we do that, right now we see some strange behavior, but the reason for this is we have not yet given the staff member name any of the properties that we need to include with absolute. So here I'm going to say bottom 0, left 0, and right 0. Okay, right now when we do this, it looks like it's disappeared, and this is common. Chances are it's sitting underneath the image. Anytime something disappears on you, give it a z-index. The z-index controls the stacking order. So what this means is it's like Photoshop layers. The higher the number, the higher in the stack. So the default value, I believe, is 1. I'm just going to give this a stacking order of 2. Any number here is fine. Okay, no, it's not here. I've probably named something incorrectly, or maybe I didn't save my HTML. Staff member image name wrapper. There we are. Okay. I didn't save the HTML when I made that extra div. So it's sitting here at the bottom, and I think it's placed quite nicely, but it's going to need a tiny bit of padding. So staff member name, I'm going to give padding. It's really, it only matters on the bottom here. Padding bottom 0.5 rem. There's crystal ball. Okay. I'm going to give I'm going to give the wrapper a margin bottom of 0.25 rem. This is going to put a space between the image and the position description. Next, I'm going to put staff member description, background color, black, which we don't see there, but we might see here. Well, not really. Let me look at the finished version. Okay, there's some extra space. Part of it's because we can see the gradient better there. Let me just I'll put a margin of 0.5 rem and 2%. We're not seeing it yet. Let me lighten the background gradient, or I'm just going to go back to the not so black. And I'm going to lighten this up a little bit to say 40%. Okay, yeah, we're seeing this now. And what I can actually do is take the margin bottom off the wrapper. This will bring the element closer. I'm going to go back. Oh, I put in 2%. I should have put down 1. Okay, let me figure out what's there's too much space above it. Staff member name. Oh, okay. So what we're seeing here, actually, staff member wrapper here. There's a tiny, you notice this is quite subtle. If I click on staff member name image wrapper here, we see that the box for staff member image name wrapper has a tiny bit of extra space. And this is a very annoying part, but what's happening is the image is not going all the way to the bottom of that box. There's a tiny little bit of extra space. So what I can do to fix that, if I go, I'm just going to say staff member name img display block db. This should fix that. But it didn't. I've probably got an extra bit of padding somewhere. Let's find it. Oh yeah, staff member name wrapper has some padding on the top. Oh no. Image. Staff members themselves have some padding. That's not it. Staff member name is I'll come back to it. When in doubt and you can't find something really quickly, come back and work it out later. So here we have, there's a few more things to do, but I'm going to actually now go to the responsive strategies that I want to employ here, because I don't want this movie to take 9 weeks. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my document and decide, pull up the inspector. I'm going to decide at what size I need to change the layout in some way. So if I make the page bigger, at a certain size I see I'm running out of image, and I should make the staff member area, yeah, it's a mess right now. So let's say we notice the image stops growing at about 720. So I'm going to make my breakpoint there. And this is an easy one, the staff member area. At media, screen, and min width 720 pixels. Mobile first is most easy using a series of escalating min width media queries. So this is my first one. I'm going to do staff members. That's the section. I'm going to say display grid. And I probably should have done display grid earlier so I could have controlled the spacing better. But I'm not going back. Grid template columns, repeat 3, 1 FR. If I reload the page, there we go. We got some tweaking to do. We should maybe make our description, staff member description, a little bit smaller. Font size, I'm going to say 0.75 rem. I think it was also italicized, so font style FS italic. Yeah, fine for now. It's not perfect, but it's tweakable. Next, let's take care of our menus, these areas here, and then we'll talk about the header. So I'm going to do it above staff members just because I like to do them. I like the content to appear in the order it appears in the HTML. So here, each of these sections has a class of meal. I believe. I'm just going to check the HTML to be sure. Oh, staff members is the div whole. No, sorry. There we are. Meal sections. So each section has a class of meal. So here we want this guy to go display grid. Let's look at our screenshot for the medium sizes. Oh, the desktop size. I don't think we have a medium size. Yeah, full size and small. Yep. Okay, so the desktop size, will it work at 720? Maybe, maybe not. If it doesn't, we can just put this into a later query. Back to my styles. Display grid. Grid template columns. If I look at the screenshot or the finished version, yeah, we essentially have two sizes for these menus. We might unthinkingly just go 1FR, 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 but if we look here, this is actually a little bit smaller. Specifically, these guys are 2 times the size of this one, I think. And we'll see. So I'm going to, instead of doing equal sizes, I'm going to put 0.5 FR for 1. Then I'm going to do 1FR, 1FR. And the key with the fractional units is the number doesn't matter. The proportions between them is what matters. What we see here is columns 2 and 3 are going to be twice the width of column 1. I'm also going to give a grid gap of, I don't know, 1 rem. Let's go look at our content. There we are. You go, it's kind of promising. We see some stuff is working. But the thing that we need to be aware of here is we have 3 columns, but 4 elements. We have this one, this one, this one, and this one. So what's happening is each element, each child of the section, in other words, is being put into a grid space. But what we're going to want to do is that we want this guy to have both of the other smaller menus beside them. So if this guy takes 2 rows, this guy could take 1 row, this guy could take 1 row. So what we can do in our declaration is go grid template rows 1FR, 1FR. Again, we haven't seen much change yet, but let's look at the children. So the children here there is a H2, a section header, and then there are 3 individual table wrappers. The big menu is the first one, so we can use a nth of type pseudo class selector. Back to our styles here. So meal is doing this. What I want to do then is I want the section header to take 2 rows. So if I say grid row span 2, if I say table wrapper colon nth of type 1, so this is the first table wrapper, grid row span 2. So what we're saying, before I reload, I want this guy to span 2 columns. I want this guy to span 2 columns. This guy will span 2 rows. This guy will span 2 rows. The remaining ones will take 1 row each. Let's reload the page. Now we've got them side by side. We've got our header over here. It's stretching to cover the 2 rows. So all we got to do is figure out how to get this guy aligning here. And the property here that we will use, if we want every element in the grid parent to align in the center vertically, we would use align items center. But here we're not wanting everything to center, we're only wanting this guy to center. So what we can do section header is spanning 2, we can say align self center. So by default it will align so that it stretches to fit the space. Here this element is no longer stretching. Instead, there we go. So if we look at it, I would probably say that you see where the word breakfast gets all kind of scrunched here? We might want to make a bigger breakpoint for these machinations. So I'm going to take this content and I'm just going to make those menus change their layout a little bit later. Media screen and min width, let's put it at 800 pixels. We might need to adjust it. We should probably also pad this area. Actually, let's see. I think meal needed padding anyway. Yeah, so I'm going to do that before the query. Do we have a style for meal up here? We must, because we put the images in. Yeah, meal, I'm going to give it some padding. Padding 1 rem and 1%, just to line up with everything else. I may need to go and change those. Yeah, I think I'm going to make it 2%. Probably need to change other things to have them align pleasantly, but for now you get the idea. Oh, okay. We also notice something. Our menus are nicely separated when they're big, but not when they're small. So you know how I was saying earlier, we probably should have gone grid earlier. That's what I'm going to do here. In other words, I'm going to go to my query. Where I've set the meal sections to display grid, I'm actually going to take that and that. So display grid and grid gap. I'm going to take it and apply it to meal earlier. all this is going to do is separate the elements, and then we wouldn't have to muck around with padding. Oh, here. Meal, display grid, grid gap 1 rem. Because we haven't put any columns in here, the grid gap is really a grid row gap. So there we are. The content has spaces between it, which is nice. It's got nice padding so we can see more of the edge. We're a bit sloppy on this section. We can come back to it. But for now, that is the hard part of the layout. Getting our tables working the way we want. Let's do the header. So let's assume we want the header. We'll try it at the same place that the... Yeah, we'll do it in the same place where the menus change. So our 800 query, I'm going to do it ahead of that. I'm going to go site header, display grid, grid template columns. Here I'm going to say 1FR, 0.5 FR, 0.5 FR. So I want the logo to be bigger. I'm not sure if I really want that. We'll see. Try to remember what I did. Make the page bigger. Oh, okay. I'm going to hide the menu for a second, or the button. That'll be at a later, maybe a later movie. So I'm going to go button here. Display none for now. Okay. So that's moving over. This isn't moving over. My H2 I might not have hidden correctly. Oh yes, the span here needs to have a class of visually hidden. Save. Not doing it in the right file. I have a number of these. Let's go up top. Okay. Wrap the Eatery, the phrase itself. I'm going to give it a span with a class of visually hidden. And it could be a div as well. That should now hide it. We've got our elements happening here. I want these guys to go side by side. So at this breakpoint, I might just say menu hyphen main. I could set it to display grid. I could do display flex. I don't know if we've covered flex in class yet. It's possible, but maybe not. So I'm going to just say menu main li display inline block. There they are going side by side. I just need to adjust the relative proportions of my menus here. So what I might do is make this guy also 0.5 rem. Or maybe make the Eatery 0.25. Oops. Wrong place. I was doing that in the wrong place. My apologies. Let's make our social menu half the size of our main menu. Most of the time it works. Maybe I'll make this one 0.5 as well. Sure, good enough. We can adjust. All that's remaining now is to make sure that this guy is in the vertical center. So the first thing I'm going to do here is just on meal, line items, center. Let's inspect here what we've got. Header, grid. Okay, so the trouble is the nav itself is the element here, so these guys are not going to be affected. What I would do to test this is I would just click on the plus sign here and go header hyphen nav display grid line items center. So what I'm doing here, because grid is about parents aligning children, the ULs and LIs that I'm trying to arrange in the center aren't actually children of the grid. The navs are the children of the grid. If I want to arrange the ULs or LIs, if I want to arrange the menu inside the nav, making the nav be a grid with a line item center is what will enable me to do that. Having tested the theory in the browser, in the inspector, I can just copy it here. Paste it into my query. Make it pretty. And what we see is a menu lining up, or both menus lining up in the vertical center. Without grid or flex, this is a very difficult operation, but with grid, vertical centering is trivially easy. We've got one other issue. Oh, something's screwing up here. Let me look at what's happening here and then we will be done the video. Okay, so that's what's happening here. A line item center is what we originally applied to our meal sections. But when we align everything center, they no longer stretch. And what you're seeing to the right of the inspector here is something that we don't want here. We were trying this in order to get the heading of each section to align in the center. So I need to remove this from the styles at roughly 192. There we are. Align self is what we applied to the, so instead of everything in the grid centering, only this section header is going to center. We go back, hooray. We have, if I do say so, a very well laid out piece of content. And if we think about it, it wasn't a brutal amount of CSS. There's a bit more we could do, but I'm going to cut the video short because I've been talking forever.